My name is Mildred Koning. I'm 95. I had 5 daughters and 24 grandchildren, 30 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandchild. So for an only child, that's pretty good. I am so blessed by all my children love the Lord, the grandchildren. It's such a blessing. I'll tell you a little bit about my life story.
Yeah.
Okay, I was born in Grand Rapids, and my parents were divorced when I was 7 years old, and I had a hard time with that. But one time at my birthday party, when I was 7, my father came to visit. He said, I'll come to this party. And my maternal grandmother had given me a nice package, and in it was a Bible. And my dad said, let me see that. And he took it and he threw it across the room, and he said, that's what I think of that. And that sort of planted in me a feeling about if God was real. The mission? Mm-hmm. Okay, now that's a nice story. My mother was a soloist, and she had another friend that was a soloist too, but we had no church or anything. And this woman said, how would you like to go to the Mel Trotter Mission with me? She said, we have a music appreciation class on Tuesday evenings. And she said, I'd like to have you come along because you love music. And my mother said, oh, okay, but my kid comes along. So, of course, Mildred went along. And she didn't tell her it was a Bible study also, but it was a Bible study. And my mother got really, really into it. And we would go every week. And I would go along. But then Mr. Trotter had a daughter. Her name was Thelma. And she lived at the Dominican Center. And I would go to visit her later on the weekends. But he lived upstairs in the mission. And the mission was much different then. You probably know that. It was on the corner of Market and Lewis Street. And it was a beautiful old opera house. And on the wall it said, God is love. And I used to sit there and look at that. And one time, Mr. Trotter was a big man, and he had a great big, beautiful chair with green velvet, and it was really big. So his daughter and I would sit in there while we went to the services. And so one time, we were sitting there, and I started crying. And Mr. Trotter stopped preaching. He said, Mildred, what's the matter with you? And I said, I want to know this Jesus. So we got down at the altar and kneeled, and I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior. And so then they said, well, you know, you have to join a church. We're not a church. You have to join a church. So my mother and I both joined a church, a Grace Reformed Church. It was a Reformed church. And so then Mr. Trotter's daughter and I became very, very close friends, and every weekend we would go to his cottage on Lake Michigan. It was at Macatawa, by Macatawa Park. And I was supposed to keep track of her because she was kind of a little pistol. And then she'd come home and she said, didn't we, Mildred? And I'd say, no, we didn't. I was the little tattletale. So then one time, Mr. Trotter said, I was getting a little older then. He said, we're going to have a baptism here. He said, would you? I used to go there every weekend because my mother was working. He said, would you like to be baptized? I said, yeah. Why do you do that? Well, we go in Lake Michigan, and we go under the water, and then first you tell that you love Jesus and you want him as your personal Savior. I said, oh, I'd love to do that. So my mother and I both were baptized in Lake Michigan by Mel Trotter. And this is a little bit later on, but Mr. Trotter was supposed to walk me down the aisle when I got married, but he died the day before. And that's in this book, Man with a Mission. The things I remember about the mission is that Mr. Trotter always called him my Pops. He said, you can call me Pops. He gave me a Bible too, a Schofield Bible. And in it he wrote, this book will keep you from sin, or sin will keep you from this book. We would go to mission every Tuesday night. And I also, on Sundays, the church where we joined, I taught Sunday school. And when I got a little bit, and they had a nice little class. But when I'd come to the mission, I taught another Sunday school class, and those kids were a little different. They would blow bubbles in my face all the time. And they would say to me, "Now don't say anything to them. You have to accept these children just the way they are." So I learned to really have an outreach that way. And my mother and I really enjoyed the Bible studies and everything. And I became very evangelical. And I just always wanted to tell my story. In fact, my favorite hymn is, "I love to tell the story." He said, "I'll pay for your education when I graduate from high school." But he said, remember, he said, "you have to support your mother a little bit." And so I went to a business school. Oh, then on the weekends, I would work at the mission and be a sort of a greeter behind the counter. And then I would work in the soup kitchen, handing out the soup and so forth. And down in the basement, they had a recycled clothing store. But it was not a live-in. That was not a live-in. And then I told, the door was never locked. It was always open for people to come in. And so I'd direct them to these places. But that big cross was at the other downtown one, too. Mm-hmm. That's the same cross. And Mr. Trotter had that beautiful upstairs apartment. And he lived up there, and he had a great big chair by the window. And his daughter and I would sit there and look right down. We'd sneak out of the service and go up there and look down the downtown. I've always been loving to talk to young people. And I always say to them, "Now I'm going to tell you my life story," and I make it brief. But I said, then I'll tell you my grace story. And I said, everybody has to have a grace story. And I said, say to the person next to you, "Do you have a grace story?" And they said, if they don't, I want them to come up to me and I'll talk to them. And I'll tell them all about my Jesus. So God is using me. My mother and I used to pray, and I'm a prayer servant. And my mother and I would pray by the Davenport, and she'd go on and I'd fall asleep. She prayed so long. But I'm a prayer servant now at the Grave Church. I used to be, but I still pray even though I don't go there. It's just, God is there. He's so with me all the time. He's so real. That's what I learned at the mission, I think. You don't always learn that in a church. I'll tell you, I'm just so grateful for that ministry. And I know that sometimes I get a little bit carried away about it, but as I sit here alone, I pray for everybody by name every day. And I pray for the mission, I pray for Heartside, I pray for Dégagé, all those places that are helping people downtown. And I pray that they will not only find a physical home, but they'll find a heavenly home. And I pray that the ministry at Mel Trotter will be open arms. My legacy? She loved the Lord, and she wanted everybody to know it, but she loved him because he first loved her. And let's spread the word.